Greetings, Geeklings, Yu here, and welcome to the Geek Shall Inherit. Now, today is a big day for comic book fans everywhere, as Marvel has just released the official Avengers Infinity War trailer, and the hype is real. So without further ado, let's jump in here, take a look.
There was an idea to bring together a group of remarkable people to see if we could become something more.
Oh,
So
okay.
when they needed us, we could fight the battles
that they never could.
Oh, got T'Challa now on scene. Oh. Oh.
In time, you will know what it's like to lose. To feel so desperately that you're right, yet to fail all the same.
What?
Dread it. Run from it. Destiny still arrives.
Oh, shit.
Evacuate the city.
Oh!
Negate all defenses. And get this man a shield.
Fun isn't something one considers when balancing the universe.
Oh no, we knew it was coming!
Does put a smile on my face.
Even my dogs are hyped. Oh! Okay. I'm gonna try to keep my shit together just to at least get through this in case there's something after the bumper.
Who the hell are you guys?
Oh! Oh! Okay, so first I'm just going to throw this out there. I know that a lot of people didn't like the Iron Spider suit that came up in Civil War, but the new design, when they revealed it at the end of Homecoming, is super sweet. So I'm really excited to see Tom Holland jumping around in it. And Loki has the Tesseract. Like, called it. I think everyone knew that's where it was going to end up after Thor Ragnarok. We didn't need to see him take it. You just needed to see that look when he was going through, so that's awesome. We still do have a couple of questions coming up going into the movies, and I think these are probably the biggest ones that I've seen come up in videos, on discussion boards, Facebook, stuff like that. The first one is, where is the sixth Infinity Stone? It's the Soul Gem. A lot of people thought it was going to come up in Thor Ragnarok, especially with Hela being there, and its relationship to souls and life and death, and that seemed like a really good avenue. But we still have no more real information on that last Infinity Gem after Ragnarok. I think, yeah, this is May 2018, so we do still have Black Panther coming up before this to set him and to set Wakanda as its own sort of place in the Marvel Universe before we get to Infinity Wars. So it's possible it could come up there. I'm not entirely sure how, but I do know that they're setting this whole thing up for us. So it's possible that we can kind of dive into Wakanda and we find out a little bit more about why they're so secluded from the rest of the world, besides their access to vibranium, which is a really rare resource. It's the material that Cap's shield is made out of, for instance. We might see what other secrets they're hiding, and possibly the Soul Gem could be in there. It certainly might explain why they needed to have a protector like the Black Panther, unless we find out about other resources or something more about vibranium that would make it its own sort of thing that really needed that level of protection. So I'm guessing that when this movie cuts and we kind of go to the second movie, which is sort of the other big question people have, and I'm kind of conflating them here, is that if we don't see it in Black Panther, or maybe even if we do, this first movie is going to end in probably one of two ways. I'm guessing that either the location of the Soul Stone will be discovered by both, the Avengers and the Guardians, that whole sort of group of heroes. and Thanos, and we'll kind of be at that point where we see them both racing towards it, and that's going to be sort of what sets up the second part of the Infinity Wars. Or possibly we will end the first movie with our heroes in possession of the Soul Gem, and that's what's kind of setting them up to brace for a big battle when they know that Thanos finds out they have it, and he's going to come for them with the big guns because he wants it. The big question, the really big one that I think a lot of people have had is who's going to make it out of this alive? And there's kind of two folds to this. There's both in the story world, what we know diegetically about how the MCU has played out so far, the development of the characters and their story arcs, but then there's also just the external reality of how big movies like this are made. For instance, we know that, Chris Evans is coming up on the end of his contract. I think this might be his last. Either 1 or 2 movies left in his contract. So there's been a lot of speculation if that means that rather than renewing, they're going to be permanently moving Captain America as we know him out of the universe. I think that's definitely a possibility, especially because the way we have transitioned Bucky into the universe. So for those of you who might just be movie fans but haven't really kept up with the comics, it's canon that eventually when Steve Rogers dies, he's assassinated, that Bucky steps in and takes place as the new Captain America. And that kind of is part of his sort of redemption from, the mind control and the brainwashing and everything he went under with the Winter Soldier program. That's almost sort of like his reckoning, his repentance as he takes up the mantle of Captain America. And we know right now that Sebastian Stan still has several movies left in his contract. I don't remember the number. I might look that up, but it was a pretty big number. So it's definitely externally possible that if we move Chris Evans out, then Sebastian Stan will step up, take over more of a big role that would make sense for him, both in terms of what we know outside of the movie world and also just canonically within Marvel itself and how they might bring that into the MCU. I think that also might be possible just because of the journey we've seen Bucky take. And I think in Civil War, we kind of saw like a micro version through his interactions with T'Challa. So, with the Accords, he was framed for the explosion that killed a lot of people, including the King of Wakanda. We saw Black Panther really set up to bring out his alter ego sort of superhero identity to chase Bucky down and get revenge. But we also saw that once the truth was revealed, we knew that Bucky was set up for that. He didn't commit the crime at all. But we also get more information, so we just know about the training and the program that happened and really how much of his actions as the Winter Soldier were outside of his control. We really saw that sort of characterization from not even that much screen time in T'Challa and the kind of person he is. And maybe that reflects more on Wakandan culture overall, that he was very driven to action for revenge when the time came up to avenge his father's death. But once he learned the truth about Bucky, he immediately switched. He was able to let go of that emotional part. He was able to see the truth, to recognize it, and to transition himself into somebody who's actually on Bucky's team. And we saw that when at the end, he actually held Bucky when they kind of put him, back under, so that way they could wait to find a way to help save him. He became an ally with Cap and Bucky in that way. I think we're going to see Bucky fight with Wakanda now. He's going to be grateful for what we've seen. And I think that also sets up something interesting because we see in the trailer, he's all, get this man his shield. So we already see that aligned with Captain America and that sort of story continuity. So looking at that kind of journey of, anger and watching him transition into forgiveness and eventual acceptance of Bucky, I think that might represent sort of a larger story arc that Marvel tries to do through the MCU, and that would be a good way to set him up to take over as Captain America. I also think, and this was interesting, because when we saw Vision in the trailer with Scarlet Witch, we saw him in a more human form. And so I don't know if that's a reflection of his powers that he could take on that form like that, or why he would have. It would be, a thought that maybe something about his different appearance would be a hindrance, and that he does that as a way to kind of appeal to her and say, I can be fully what you need me to be if it's some sort of transition that happens along the way. But at that point, he definitely looked like he still had the stone, but we later saw them coming for him. And I think pretty much in Ultron, once we knew that Thanos was coming, we knew that Vision was in possession of the Mind Gem, and we knew that there's ultimately going to be this reckoning where they come to get it. And it seems more likely than not, for both the level of hype they've been setting up with Thanos coming and the emphasis they've been placing on the danger of a complete gauntlet, I don't see a way that we get through 2 movies without at some point Thanos having the glove. It's completed. He has all 6 gems, and that means one's going to be taken from Vision. And since we don't know fully everything about the inner workings of Vision and how Ultron put him together, really, we don't know what happens when that mind gem comes out, but if he does survive it, he won't be the same person, the same character that we're familiar with. And given Scarlet Witch's backstory and that she's really been set up for a lot of tragedy, both in Ultron and losing Quicksilver at the end, her twin brother, seeing that they manipulated the Civil War storyline for the movies to make sort of her unintentional overuse of her power be the precipitating event instead of the New Warriors. I think that she hasn't had a good run so far, so it wouldn't surprise me if they're really setting up the romantic storyline between her and Vision, just to kind of emphasize the heartbreak when the mind gem eventually gets removed and she has to either watch him die or watch the person she loves become someone different, both of which are pretty awful. So it really kind of depends what line of tragedy Marvel wants you to take on. And the idea of him possibly just changing, becoming something else, maybe more robotic, maybe less human if the mind gem is removed versus just straight up death. That might set up room for Marvel when the heroes eventually get the stones back to keep him alive. But at the same time, once they learn the power of the gauntlet and the Infinity Stones, you really have to wonder, would they be willing to let someone just walk around this as part of their being? And would they feel that Vision could protect it enough by himself, especially after we've seen him attacked once? Or will they go out of their way to make the stones harder to find and Vision becomes a sacrifice in that? So I don't know. We'll see that. So I think that we're set up to lose probably at least Vision, Captain America, possibly Tony Stark. We have, we have War Machine as kind of a backup, but really except to set up emotional things like, the role of almost losing him in his paralysis in Civil War. He hasn't played too much of a huge part, really. So I'm not sure if we would be setting up for him to sort of take over. It just doesn't seem like we've really been introduced to him enough as a character for us to really connect and see him as someone who takes over. And I also don't know how much more they're going to put him as a mentor role to Spider-Man, because now that we've seen his investment, I don't know if we're going to lose him quite yet. So it's kind of hard to say. But again, Marvel does kind of like to really give some tragedy to its characters. So now that we see him and Pepper, their relationship really growing after all these years, we saw at the end of Homecoming, the indication that he's going to propose to her. They might set up something like that. As for the other characters, I just don't know yet. I think that I'm going to need to watch the trailer a couple more times, go back through some of my notes, maybe even review a couple of the movies again, just to really kind of follow the arcs of the stories and see who looks like they're going to come out on top and who might not. Hey, my dogs are very, very concerned about some of these deaths I'm worried about. We know that Spider-Man's going to make it through because he's going to be the first post-Infinity War solo movie. And I think given that we've seen a lot of action in New York, that's going to set us up for something really interesting. And it also might show this transition away from sort of the original Phase 1 heroes into a new set of heroes. So I think I'll do some research both on kind of what we've seen in the movie so far, rewatch the trailer, and maybe look up some information about just the actors' contracts to see how much those might play a part. And I might do another theory video coming up before the movie comes out. But again, it's coming out May 2018. That is a lot sooner than we think it's going to be, given that it's almost December now. So the hype is real, guys. I loved the trailer. I'm really excited to kind of see how they're bringing everyone together. I loved seeing Thor on the Guardian ship. I think that'll be kind of interesting to have it not just be, a human character meeting the Guardians first, especially when they've reconciled that there are now aliens and other life, but an Asgardian, because they're sort of something else, they're sort of alien, but not. There's a whole different sort of mythos there. So I think that'll be really interesting to see, and I'm very excited to see Peter Quill coming back to Earth. I think it'll have sort of a weird nostalgia feel, but also meet a fish out of water thing, because he's been gone for so long. He gets sort of back channel news about, music players and stuff like that through other characters as just sort of little fun nods. So it'll be interesting to see him come back to Earth and just to see what his home planet's turned into. But I don't know how much we'll get to play with that, given that he's coming back in a state of crisis. But anyway, so I'm going to do a lot more research into this. I'm going to kind of delve in, and I will get back to you guys once I have a better idea of where I think everyone's going to go. And I've watched the trailer like 1,000 more times to satisfy my own inner neediness. So thank you all for watching. Again, I'm YuYuGawain. This is the Geek Shall Inherit, and I'll see you next time.